I grew up in San Francisco de Paula, in Havana, Cuba, and there's only one claim to fame that the pueblo had was the fact that Ernest Hemingway lived there for 21 years of his life. And my father happens to be the person who knew him for those 21 years. My father met Ernest Hemingway when he was 10 years old in 1939. And by the time that I was growing up, after Hemingway's death, my father was the director and administrator of the Ernest Hemingway Museum, Finca Vigía. And what I remember is my father taking my brothers and I up to the Finca Vigía, showing us the house, letting us run free, the books, the bullfighter outfits. And that creative environment, I think, was definitely one of the reasons that I wanted to be an artist. It's a really interesting situation because I left Cuba when I was 7 years old, and I lived in Spain for 2.5 years in Madrid, and I arrived in the United States in 1974. So by definition, I would be considered a Cuban American, but I consider myself Cuban. And it's interesting because I have traveled to different countries. I've been fortunate enough to do so. I've been in France, when I went to China, and people ask me, where are you from? And I go, I'm from Cuba. I don't tell them I'm from New Jersey. I don't tell them I'm Cuban American. Basically, my statement or my response is I'm Cuban, which in a way, my wife laughs about that very much because she just tells me, I think you're confusing the person who's asking you. And the reason why is because he's Cuban. What is he doing in China? How did he get here? So I actually consider myself Cuban, and the whole Cuban American. I happen to live here. I love this country, but I was born in Cuba, and I'm gonna just say I consider myself Cuban, not Cuban American. Where I believe probably the essence of Raul Villarreal in this painting is in the cynicism, a little cynical. It also has a little bit of humor, and the whole juxtaposition and the contrast. I think probably the observation of the two different worlds. That's where I am right in between, and I believe I'm probably there because of the experience of being an immigrant, un emigrante. Is that at times, if you ever have the time to consider. If you have not experienced being an immigrant, but going somewhere and having the experience of being called or being perceived as an immigrant is a very how would you say, heart-wrenching experience, and especially if you're a child. When I went to school in this country, but luckily my parents, we moved to an area that there were a lot of other Latino children, so it wasn't that devastating. But I could picture other children or other immigrants going to a place where there's really not the familiar sound of your own language, of the smell of the cuisine from your country. Is a totally different experience, and I have to look back and think of how my parents were extremely adventurous and very courageous to leave our homeland and venture into an unknown and persevere. And I think being in this country since 1974, I give them a lot of credit. Well, one of the experiences or just what I appreciate about my father's life, and it's interesting because I worked in a project with my father for 13 years, the book about his life and his friendship with Ernest Hemingway. And Hemingway's Cuban Son was actually published in 2009. And in the book, in the acknowledgments page, I give thanks to my father for recognizing that his son is a dreamer. And I think my father recognized that. At an early age. And I think it had to do with the fact that he worked with a creative person who was a dreamer And I give thanks to my father and my mother for allowing me to dream. You know, as an artist, wouldn't have any other life. With all the struggles and everything, it's the only thing I know how to do well without any effort. Or at least have people think there's very little effort behind it. When I'm thinking of the We Are You piece, I thought this is the perfect one, you know? Kind of thought it was perfect because of the imagery itself. I went back to something classical like the Pieta. And here you have, you know, a mother losing a son. And then you have the weeping angel. But, you know, the Pieta we know is La Virgen Maria mourning the loss of Jesus. But I see this as un balsero, a rafter, or someone who has tried to cross physical borders to get to another country and got lost at sea. And how many thousands of people have been lost at sea from Haiti, Dominican Republic, Cuba, and many other countries? So in a way, this piece, Exodus, Requiem, is about those who have lost their lives. And could be, definitely he's a son, could be a brother, could be a father. So there is the primal love that, you know, of family. There's that love for family that if you lose a loved one is very important. And went back to the whole classical idea from the Renaissance of the three pieces, which here this one has four, but in the smaller version, I'm going to go back only to three. The colors, there's a lot of symbolism. The ocean again, depicting Yemaya. Yemaya, very powerful Orisha. Those who are aware of the Afro-Caribbean pantheon, who governs the oceans, the depth, and then the ocean waves, has a lot to offer us, but can also bring devastation. You have the symbolism of La Docoyares, from Elewa, black and red, to open our paths and to give us luck in our journey. Yemaya, the white and the blue, and then her sister, Ochung, the goddess of love and lust. And they're still working on putting four more. Because if this individual was going to make a journey, especially from a country like Cuba, he would have had los siete collares to be fully protected. So here, I'm still working on the three. I'm going to be finishing up the four. So there's a lot of symbolism that has to do with my Afro-Cuban roots. And the colors, the imagery, there's definitely always some kind of a message that has to do with that Afro-Cuban background. And I actually know for a fact my great-grandmother, who took a very beautiful photograph of my father when he was 19 years old, beautiful to look at. She was almost 90 years old, had a very Taino face. So I know that my heritage, I have Taino, Spaniard, and African. And I think what a great mix to have being part of the Caribbean. And so all this is also part of my work. It's part of my iconography. One way or another, when you look at my work and you study it, you're going to see some kind of a hint of the Afro-Cuban spirituality in the work. Writing the book, Hemingway's Cuban Son, and the experience of writing a book, I will tell you, that has been the most difficult project I've ever undertaken. And first of all, I didn't consider myself a writer, but I do come from a background of people who are very good storytellers, like even my father. So with that, I undertook the project, and Do not regret one single moment. So here's how the preface starts. He was stiff and sore now, and his wounds and all of the strained parts of his body hurt with the cold of the night. I hope I do not have to fight again, he thought. I hope so much I do not have to fight again. Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. And this is the part when the old man had been fighting the big fish for numerous hours, and he's really tired, but he continues. And I kind of felt that my father now embodied that old man and the old man the old man and the sea. He was tired. He didn't want to fight anymore, but he endured and he finished the project. So I thought that was a very appropriate quote. And here, Ernest Hemingway, my mother and my father, in 1957, 1 week before they got married, and Ernest Hemingway said to my mother as the picture was taken, "Take good care of my Cuban son. Cuida bien a mi hijo cubano."